It is November 30th, 2020. This is the Owen Sound City Council, 7 p.m. Council met in a closed session that started at 5:45 p.m. During the closed session, Council reviewed minutes from a closed session of regular Council meeting held on November 16th, 2020. Council discussed one matter regarding labor relations or employee negotiations and a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied, carried on by or on behalf of the municipality with QP 1189, and direction was provided to staff. Council also discussed one matter regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual respecting board and committee public appointments, and direction was provided to staff. Council also discussed one matter regarding a proposed or pending disposition of land by the municipality and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose respecting city property. No direction was provided. Lastly, Council discussed one matter regarding advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose respecting a city property. No direction was provided. Just before I go too much further, I point out Councillor Tamming is unable to attend tonight. He was there for the open session earlier. He had another matter he had to attend to. We've received a couple of questions and a couple of comments publicly. I want to reconfirm, and it's been stated a few times in this meeting, that staff have met with the Grey Bruce Health Unit to ensure that we have safe workspace at City Hall and here in the council chambers. We are measured off, and the council is spread out further. We're measured off and socially distanced a full 2 meters from each other. While we're not required to wear masks here, some of us choose to do so. We all take the threat of COVID-19 seriously and are following the rules. With that, I ask council or staff maybe first, is there any additional business?
Through you, Mayor, there's no addendums this evening.
Thank you. And council? Deputy Mayor, sorry, promoting you before your time. Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, Worship. I would just like to update about the Celebrate Owen Sound coming this Saturday.
Great, thank you. And Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be speaking about the Zonta Club of Owen Sound tonight.
Good, thank you. Anyone else? I think we're going to be long enough that I'm going to stay quiet and keep moving here. Declaration of interest, general nature thereof. Councillor Thomas.
Yes, Your Worship, I had a declaration of interest in the closed session.
Thank you. We're down to number 6, or we're up to number 6, whichever way you look at it. Confirmation of council minutes.
Moved by myself, Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Hamley, that the minutes of the special council meeting held on November 13th, 2020 as printed be adopted.
All in favor? And that is carried.
Moved by myself, Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Hamley, that the minutes of the closed session of the regular council meeting held on November 16th, 2020 as printed be adopted.
And all in favor? And that is carried. And one more.
Moved by myself, Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Hamley, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on November 16th, 2020 as printed be adopted.
All in favor? And that is carried. So number 7 is motion to move the council into committee of the whole.
Moved by myself, Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Hamley, that City Council now move into committee of the whole to consider public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business.
And all in favor? And that is carried. So we are now in committee of the whole. At number 8 in the agenda, we have no public meetings. At number 9, we have 3 deputations tonight, which is great. The first one, we're going to receive Sarah Cowley and Barb Feedy from Grey County with regard to the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. Welcome.
Here we go. Thank you very much for having us tonight. So we are here to present to you the results, our plan for community safety and wellbeing planning for the municipalities of Bruce and Grey. You do have the presentation in your package, I believe, and the plan as well. And so we're going to run you through the priorities for action. So the reason we came together as a collaborative to complete community safety and wellbeing planning is because under Police Services Act in January 2019, it was passed that all municipalities needed to have a community safety and wellbeing plan in place and posted, tackling issues that were upstream related to crime prevention. And as has happened historically in Grey and Bruce counties, 16 lower tier municipalities and 2 counties came together to complete one shared plan, which we believe is the largest collaboration of municipalities in the province, which we're really excited about. The Ontario framework, of course, is this bullseye diagram. The goal is to focus more on the outer rings, the larger rings, on social development interventions and prevention activities. And then we would generally see less of a need for the risk intervention and incident response. So this is where we want to see upstream interventions so that we're catching things before a family or an individual ends up in crisis and requires the use of emergency services, hospitalization, that kind of thing. So our advisory committee is 72 partners. Because we were looking at this from a regional perspective, we wanted to ensure that we had the majority of the players at the table. Although the toolkit from the Ministry of the Solicitor General does present guidelines for the minimum requirement of participants, we decided that we needed a number of services at our table because they do serve all of Grey Bruce, and we wanted to make sure that our plan was comprehensive. We'd also like to highlight that the participation of almost 2,000 residents took place earlier in the year when we had our community engagement survey online and in hard copies at municipal offices for residents to complete. And I highlight for people that in a region of 160,000 people, we had that number of responses. Halton region that has 3.5 times the number of population residents that we have had 3.5 times less the responses on their first round. So our communities are highly engaged, which we were really pleased to see. We also wanted to let you know that we ensured that we were connected with the Canadian Municipal Network on Crime Prevention and the Ontario Municipal Social Services Association throughout the completion of this plan, and they were instrumental in helping us move forward into our action planning. Our timeline, you can see we kicked off the project in September of 2019. We did have a mild pause, a very slight pause over March and April with regards to the pandemic and the impacts on organizations as they ramped up on their services. But we were able to keep on track, and where many communities across Ontario have actually paused their planning, we continued with the planning, and we decided that we had such great engagement in the spring that we really wanted to keep that momentum going. So here we are in November and December with plan adoption by municipalities, and we're planning sustainability and working on the finalization of our indicator report, which is a data report for our local data. Our model, this has not changed much since the start of the project, but where we are now is moving into action, phase 2 of implementation. So we'll be looking at identifying or creating the action tables that are required to tackle the priority areas of risk. So what are our priorities for action? This is the area where everyone is most interested to see what came up. And I want to highlight for everyone that these were determined based on public perception through the survey, which were perceptions and feelings, but they have also been clarified and distilled down using the local data that we have from a variety of sources, research and surveys and otherwise from organizational data. So priority risk area 1 is addiction and is that the literature shows that regular heavy drinking remains a key area of concern for Grey and Bruce, and we track use higher than the rest of Ontario. And of emergency department visits, over half are linked to alcohol, and we've also seen a 2.5 to 3 times increase in the opioid-related visits to our hospitals. We also know that school student alcohol and cannabis use is increasing, although we can't trend at this point because of the legalization of cannabis in 2018. And we know that addictions and substance use is the cause of increasing hospitalization and death in the region. When we look at priority risk area 2, this is mental health. We know that self-rated mental health indicators show approximately 20% of our population, our residents in the region, are experiencing a lot of stress, and 15% are seeking help for mental health concerns. We know that more than 30% of students grades 7 to 12 experience moderate to severe psychological distress, and a third of those want help but still say they don't know where to turn. We know that both EMS and police services in the region have seen increases in calls related to mental health concerns, and 211 calls have also increased related to mental health. Finally, we know that self-harm emergency department visit rates have tripled among young females locally, and that the Bruce and Grey male population aged 25 to 44 years of age have higher hospitalizations and death by suicide than the rest of Ontario. When we look at priority risk area 3, crime prevention, we are working with the police services. We do have statistics, of course, for calls for service from all of the 8 services, the 4 OPP detachments and the 4 local police detachments. But what really came through at this point is that criminal court cases are showing trends that are increasing over time for most offenses. From 2017 to 2019, we saw a 17% to 27% increase in court cases. And although we know that assault injuries are comparable to Ontario, the rates for emergency department visits related to assaults is actually higher than Ontario. And so that's something we definitely want to look at. It seems that the impact of the assault is greater for some reason in Grey Bruce. Priority risk area 4, housing and homelessness. A few key statistics here are that our region has more owned dwellings and far fewer rental dwellings, and some have more subsidized housing. Over 15% of homeowners and almost 50% of renters in our region spend more than 30% of their monthly income on shelter costs, and that's the cutoff for what's deemed affordable housing. And this is a situation that leaves them 1 to 2 paychecks away from homelessness, from not being able to pay for their housing. We do know that average housing prices are increasing, although that remains lower than Ontario. And we do have very low rental vacancy rates in our region, which again are similar to Ontario. But the situation this creates is when someone's in an unhealthy living situation or seem to be underhoused, they have nowhere else to go because there's very little stock in the market. We also know that seasonal housing numbers are high in a few of our municipalities, and we know that housing waitlists are increasing as are calls to 211. Finally, priority risk area 5, poverty and income. We know that median household incomes in our region are lower than Ontario. They're the lowest in Owen Sound, Hanover, and the South Bruce Peninsula. And approximately 20% of the youth in our region continue to live in poverty. That's the highest in Huron-Kinloss at 30%, followed by Chatsworth, Owen Sound, Southgate, and Erin Elderslie, which are all 25 to 28% of youth living in poverty. We also know that there's trends from various organizations showing increased need for the kinds of services that support poverty-stricken families, such as Ontario Works, Ontario Disability Support Program, the United Way Backpack Program, utility assistance, and 211 calls related to food and meals and utilities. Finally, we know that over 25% of residents report spending more than 30% of their income on their housing, but 5% in the past year report they had not paid their rent or mortgage on time. 18% report not paying other bills on time, and 9% said they couldn't buy enough food because they didn't have enough money to purchase it. So when we look at where we're headed with this, these are big, weighty issues. We want to focus on the fact that we have a lot of good work happening across Grey and Bruce. We have a variety of committees that have been running for years, working on these kinds of complex systemic issues, and we need to leverage that work. We need to drive it in a new way. And so the goal is to leverage that work across Grey and Bruce by enhancing initially the collaboration and the coordination of the work, bringing those structures together across sectors, making sure we're being as efficient as possible with those resources and trying to drive As I mentioned earlier, we are working on an indicator report, and this is really to facilitate that action identification and the outcome evaluation. So we're collating something that hasn't happened in a number of years in Grey Bruce. We are collating information, data from a variety of sources, organizational and otherwise, for Grey Bruce under the 10 priority areas of risk. So although we have 5 in the plan, there are actually 5 more that we asked about in the survey that we'll be tracking. And so we're collecting the data and making sure that we have a variety of local statistics to create a benchmark and a foundation for how we move forward with evaluating the impacts of this project and the work that the various organizations and committees will engage in. So sustainability for Bruce and Gray. Everyone's in, of course, various stages of budget planning for 2021. And the goal across the communities is to create a 2021 budget for the project, the same way that the 2020 budget was created, with leveraging a pool of funding. So a very small amount per municipality in order to move the action forward and to make sure that we're doing this, again, in a really cost-effective way, but also in a way that ensures that we don't duplicate services or the work across the municipality. So we have one plan, we're taking action on the priority areas together, and that way we can have a more streamlined approach. So next steps, of course, we're looking for endorsement from all of the lower tier councils. The plan and the indicator report will be posted on our website, which will be getting a refresh. We will continue with the work of the coordinator to drive this work forward. We know there's lots of plans that are created and then sit on a shelf because we expect someone to manage it off the side of their desk, and that's simply not possible in this regard. We'll look at the action tables for those priority areas of risk and dive down into specific action plans with specific identifiable actions to be taken. And then we'll be looking at the monitoring, evaluation, and revision of the plan with annual progress reports to the advisory committee, councils, and the ministry as the plan moves on. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you. Questions, comments? Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Sarah, for your presentation. I have two prepared questions. First one, our police costs are among the highest in Ontario. I'm wondering if there's a long-term goal with the collaboration of so many community partners to have mental health respond to some of the calls to police to the point of some kind of reduction in our police budget.
So the history of this plan, which was 10 years in the making across the province, it took 10 years to get to the point of legislating this work. The goal is that we know if we're investing in upstream interventions, that the costs for that incident response should decrease over time. So that is ultimately the goal. Crime prevention, stopping it before it happens, and making sure that the services are being provided before anyone hits a crisis point where police services or EMS have to be involved. So that is the ultimate goal, but it is a slow process at this point. The research shows this is an investment in the future of those interventions.
Okay, and the second one, if I could just take a page out of Councillor Merton's book, there are many, many partners mentioned in this plan and a lot of talk about collaboration. Is there or will there be measuring tools in place where we can see results in all the different areas and have some kind of documentation of what these different partners have accomplished?
Yes, there absolutely will be. So under each of those 5 priority areas for risk that we outlined, we'll be diving in with the subject matter experts. So groups like the Community Drug and Alcohol Strategy, the Poverty Task Force. We'll be working alongside them and making sure we have the right players at the table to look at creating those specific actions that we can tackle year 1, year 2, up to year 5 of the plan at this point in time. And we'll be working with them to also look at those outcome evaluation measures so that we track. And then on an annual basis or more frequently, depending on which group is created or defined and how long that action will take to implement, we'll be reporting back to the advisory committee and to councils and then to the ministry as well.
Okay, and finally, I just want to congratulate everyone that's been involved in this program to somehow stay on schedule. I don't know how you did that, but I think that's awesome. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Marion?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Sarah. Thank you so much, Sarah, for all the work that you've put into this. You've done a wonderful job in corralling the people that needed to be corralled and reaching out to those who needed to provide some input to make this plan workable. And also congratulations on looking at it with a regional approach, with Owen Sound being a hub and most things being Bruce Gray. It just made a whole lot of sense to do it that way. You were looking for endorsement of the plan, so I'm happy to move that endorsement, but I do have a further question on the financial part of things. If there are this many municipalities and the 2 counties involved, do you have an amount that you're looking for from each of them, or?
So at this time, from a Grey County perspective, I mean, Pam could speak to it, but I'm happy to say Grey County is funding the entire portion for the Grey County municipalities. At this point in time, they're putting in $55,000 that has already been approved for the budget for 2021. And Bruce County has committed $10,000, which with each of the Bruce County municipalities putting in $5,000.
Thank you for that. Thanks so much.
Anyone else? Scott, go ahead. Councillor Gregg.
Thanks, everybody, and thanks, Sarah, for being here tonight. When I look at, and it's a great plan, sometimes I look at something like this and I look through the numbers and try to delve in, and there's one that jumps out to me, and we hear a lot of discussion about affordability and housing and homelessness and so close to not being able to pay rent. But when we talk about 30% of their monthly income, and I'll get to my question here in a moment, but you could have somebody that purchases an $800,000 home, puts $80,000 down over 25 years at 4.5%, pays bi-weekly. They're paying $1,900 bi-weekly, about $3,900 a month. That person actually fits the criteria for 30% of their monthly income. That annual income for that individual is well north of $150,000 in annual income. I would argue that person shouldn't be 1 to 2 paychecks away from not being able to pay their mortgage. That's an entirely different scenario than someone that maybe makes $32,000 a year or $74,000. When you consider numbers like that, is the implementation of a ceiling for income or mortgage or some of those lockdown numbers ever considered so that you can really narrow and micro target? Because when it's like that, it's quite broad, and it's including people and statistics that in a stat like that aren't exactly relevant.
Mm-hmm. Certainly the statistics that I know the housing groups that are looking at housing across Grey and Bruce are constantly looking at that salary threshold as well. What's the income for the family? What are they bringing in? So we do know that there are some outliers related to that who maybe purchased a much larger home and have a much larger mortgage payment and still maybe aren't bringing in as much as might be safe. I think the corollary to that would be that those people are perhaps still just as close, depending on their family circumstance, of living beyond their means. So I think that's something as well that needs to be considered because those people actually have nowhere to go. And with housing costs in the area rising, prices for homes are increasing. And so potentially people to get into the housing market are paying more than they can afford too. But certainly the housing groups, the Poverty Task Force, other groups that have been tackling this issue do look at those specific income brackets as well. You're welcome.
Great. Thank you. You know, Sarah, I remember we just went onto the police board in January of 2015, and Mike Dawes, I think, was a staff sergeant at the time that came with this plan, and those circles were there, and he was talking about the simple thing of Children's Aid looking after a family may see something that is appropriate for housing or may see something that's appropriate for policing. And sometimes it falls between the cracks or vice versa. And how do you get that you start to deal with some of the issues before somebody loses their temper, loses their cool, loses their ability to cope mentally, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And so many agencies, they don't stop at the border of Owen Sound or the border between Grey and Bruce. So it's so important that we're so glad the Grey County really led on this and pulled in Grey and Bruce. We want to thank Marion for being involved, Pam for being involved. Chief Ambrose is in the room. He was involved from the police point of view, and everyone else that was involved. It's just phenomenal that we were able to pull this together, share these ideas. I suspect if we all tried to go it ourselves, 55,000 would be combined of hundreds. It would have to be. So this is phenomenal that it's come together. I'm glad that the provincial government pushed this on all of us in a sense that allowed us to pull it together. And I think it's hopefully going to be a big change of how we police, how we deal with social services and policing together going forward, and gives us opportunities to change, monitor, and I think it's great. So thanks to you, thanks to everyone that's involved. It's been great, and we'll have a report coming up that Marion will be able to move in a minute there. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Barb. Next on our list is a deputation from Joachim Ostertag with regard to violence prevention, Gray Bruce. That's what we're wiping down. There he is. Welcome. I'll get you to push that little movie-colored button and turn on the mic. Yes.
Bruce. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and staff and council, I've stood here before several times, many times, to talk about 6th of December, the National Day of Remembrance and actions on violence against women. And I do this again because it's such an important issue and it doesn't go away. Before I talk about the 6th of December, the National Day of Remembrance, I want to talk about the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which is an international United Nations-led campaign. The 16 days focus on the most pervasive breach of all human rights, violence against women, and it's a worldwide issue. And the goal is to call for global actions to increase awareness, galvanize advocacy efforts, and share knowledge and innovations on gender-based violence. The United Nations calls for all of us to honor and support women, the women's movement, elevate the voices of young feminists in our communities, neighborhoods, and nationally. As we all know, we are going through a pandemic. That's why we have all these masks. And what we know is that through COVID, there was a major increase on violence against women, which was already expected at the onset of it due to isolation, lack of income, insecurity, have more difficulties to get away from abusive partners, husbands. And there's also more stress, as most of us know, being kind of stuck at home. But it's not the stress itself, it's the fact that women cannot get the supports. It's also interesting that there's less police reports on domestic violence and violence against women, but the shelters and the support systems are really overwhelmed by the increase of calls. And that shows that the risks increase when there are other risk factors, so the risk for women. So we have to be aware of that when we have other catastrophes, emergencies, that this will impact on women more than it impacts on men. So we all need to take actions. We have to speak up. We have to support women and children. We have to elevate the voices of women. And we have to become allies. We have to become allies to support women in our neighborhoods, in our families, and the support systems and the organizations that are here. So I find it will be quite important, I think, for all of us to look into these issues during this time. And you can read up about 16 days of activism online. Now I want to move to the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence. On December 6th, 1989, a man entered the École Polytechnique in Montreal, and he killed 14 women. And he only killed them because they were women. That was his main purpose. That was his intent to do this that day. So that was 31 years ago. When we talk about these events, it seems like, well, they are outstanding events. And we hear about violence against women in at the police, in the military, in all kinds of services, and we hear it in individual issues, and we never put these things together. I guess, is this the clicker? This one? Oh, okay. So on December 6th, we will commemorate the 14 women who were killed on the 6th of December, 1989. But before I go there, I want to talk a little bit about the pervasiveness of violence against women. On average, one woman or girl is killed every other day in Canada. Every other day. And on average, every 6 days, a woman is being killed in an intimate relationship. Most women in Canada report that they did experience some form of physical or sexual violence in their relationships or by other men. Most women. When we just ask people in our families, in our communities, we will hear that this is everywhere. And we are all affected by that. And some statistics say that 3,000 Indigenous women are missing, which also points to the intersects between racism, misogyny, and sexism. And so the violence against Indigenous women is many folds higher than against white women. In Germany, a woman wrote about 40 years ago a book which was basically called The Very Normal Violence in Families, because it is such a normal thing and we often don't notice it. And I think as a man and looking around, it's an issue that particularly we as men all need to be really, really aware of. And when we talk about statistics and the narratives and stories around violence against women, we always use the word women. Right? We focus on women because they are the victims and survivors of violence. But then at the same time, we need to think about that behind all these forms of violence, there are men. Almost all violence against women comes from men. So this is where the change really needs to happen. We need to support women. We need to support women's services. But we really need to rethink, how do we raise boys? How do we relate to each other as guys, as men? How do we speak up when we see violence, when we hear about violence? How do we support our daughters? But a big thing what I've found out I worked for about 30 years in violence prevention and with men who are violent towards women, is that almost all the men, probably 99% of men who abuse women, come from homes where there also was violence of some form. And violence can have many forms: emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, male privilege, and so on. So the men who came to our program, at the men's program, when we dug a little bit deeper, they talked about these issues. And we don't give men actually a forum to talk about it. It's all hidden. We don't talk about stuff that is not good. We talk about how to be strong, how to not feel. So this is something where we can challenge ourselves. I think we need to challenge ourselves and all of us, and particularly those of us who have boys, sons, to raise them in very gentle ways, nurturing. It's not about being tough, raising tough guys. It's to be soft and gentle and supportive, and to work together in solidarity. So all this is also about taking action. So we need to think about during the 16 days, and also particularly on December 6th, how can we take action on violence against women in all our areas? And it's not easy, but I think we all need to challenge ourselves, and we can do it. So I want to I need to go back. I don't do this often enough. Just the one with all the phases, please. Thanks. Okay. At this point, I want to read the names of the 14 women who were killed in 1989. And then I ask for a moment of silence. Geneviève Bergerot, Sonia Pelletier, Anne-Marie Lemay, Michel Richard, Anne-Marie Edward, Maurice Leclerc, Maurice Langanier, Annie Turcot, Barbara Maria Kluznik, Barbara Daniel, Annie Saint-Arnaud, Nathalie Croteau, Hélène Colgan, Maud Aviernik. Well, thank you very much for listening to this and for your interest in the issue, the ongoing interest. So I would like to ask the city to have the flag on half-mast if it's possible. Now, the 16 days of action already started. It's on 25th of November, and they go to 10th of December. I'm not sure if you can do this, or if you can't do that, maybe do it on the 6th of December. And there will be an event online. Usually we do it a real event, a live event, but this year, because of COVID, it has to be filmed, and it will be on the 6th of December. You can go on the website of Violence Prevention Grey Bruce, and it will be on YouTube on the 6th of December. So I hope that you all can take part in that. Hope and ask you to support the local support services for women in these really tough times. Do you have any questions?
I don't know if there's any questions. We'll find a way to figure out the flag. Yeah, I'll leave it with staff to figure out there's a process, but we're probably getting close to the well, we are getting close to the 6th, so we'll find a way for sure. We thank you for coming in and doing this annually. It brings it back to mind. Just while you're talking, I keyed in December 6th and Day of Remembrance and got lots of information for people that want to read, want to understand, want to think, and perhaps some sources in there that will help them if they need family help. As we've talked at the police board, we do recognize that there are different pressures from COVID-19, as you have pointed out, and it is a little more word intense or serious perhaps. Well, it's always serious, so I don't want to suggest that it isn't, but we recognize that it's intensified this year with COVID for sure. So again, thank you for coming in.
So the website of violence prevention is at the bottom there, and there people can call for or ask for supports. And there's also the link to the 6th of December event on YouTube.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
I'm going to ask one of the councillors if they can move a motion to have the flag lowered to half-mast on December 6th. Councillor Merton, go ahead.
I will make that motion.
Okay, any further discussion with council? Call the question, all in favor? There we go, it's done.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Brandon. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening.
And we have one more deputation from Colleen Trask-Seaman from the Owen Sound Hunger and Relief Effort, or Osha, with a request for a tax rebate grant. Just as we're cleaning the microphone there. Welcome. So there's going to be a little mauve colored button there if you want to push that, and then the red light will come on there. It's on. Go ahead.
Thank
Welcome.
you. His Worship, City Councilors, Deputy Mayor, and City Staff, my name is Colleen Trask-Seaman, and I'm the Executive Director of OSHARE. Today, I'm here to give you an update on OSHARE and what's been happening in the last year, and to ask for your help. Throughout my presentation, you'll see quotes in red. Many of these are taken from the public health study that was done in 2017. OSHARE, which stands for Owen Sound Hunger and Relief Effort, opened its doors on Valentine's Day in 2013. The mission was and continues to be to serve warm, nutritious meals to anyone who needs them in our community, no questions asked. OSHARE was started as a Monday to Friday 5 to 6:30 program. It expanded in 2017 to include a lunch to go program on Saturdays after we learned that a number of our guests had not eaten from Friday dinner until Monday dinner. We typically serve about 40 lunches on a Saturday. It has also become a community. OSHARE is a place where we celebrate birthdays and weddings, we grieve together and support each other through difficult times. We celebrate graduations and tooth fairy visits. We come together for Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, and many other holidays like a family. It is a community. Since opening, OSHARE has served over 120,000 meals to families and individuals in our community. Although we don't ask any questions of our guests, we know that we serve guests who are primarily from Owen Sound, but we also have guests from across Bruce and Grey County. Our guests are all ages, from infants in high chairs to seniors. In the last few years, we have seen an increase in the number of families, students, and seniors. Last year, we estimate that we served about 4,600 meals to children and youth from our community. Our volunteers are the best. Our meal program is run by 3 staff and hundreds of volunteers. We have church groups, community groups, business groups, families with children of all ages, and individuals who come to serve at OSHARE. Last year, our volunteers gave over 5,300 hours to make sure that there were hot meals for anyone who needed them in this community. Children and youth volunteer as part of our program. We also had school classes who came to volunteer to learn kitchen skills while building community awareness. In 2017, the Grey Bruce Public Health Unit did a study on OSHARE. Some of their findings were as follows. OSHARE services are highly valued. While volunteers and staff felt that receiving food was most important to our guests, what we learned was that most of our guests spoke equally to the importance of the social aspect for their health. Public Health made several recommendations, including partnering with community resources to offer their services to our guests while the guests were at OSHARE, the creation of a healthy food policy, increasing the amount of fresh produce that we serve to our guests, and increasing food skills to guests and youth from the community. So our board took that and did a needs assessment. And we realized that to accept more fresh produce and larger corporate and business donations, we needed more cooler and freezer space. We also realized that if we were going to partner with community organizations to come in and serve our guests, that we needed separate space for them to be able to offer their services. If we were going to increase skills in food service for our guests and youth, we needed space and more equipment. And to prepare and cook large volumes of healthier food, we needed commercial ovens and stovetops. The pictures that you see up there are the kitchen that we had at the Harmony Center, where we were so thankful to get our roots, but we realized that in order to do what we needed to do for this community, we just couldn't continue to cook using the stove and the roasters that you see there. So we met with the Harmony Center to see if these goals were going to be possible in our current location. But due to the infrastructure of the old building, it was not. The board decided that these goals were important enough to our guests and to our community, so they began to look for space where this could be achieved. We knew it was really important to our families and guests that we, number one, stay in the downtown core. Next, we needed to be on a bus route, and finally, we needed a space that was totally accessible. And then the space around the corner opened up, and it was able to accommodate everything we needed, including a walk-in cooler and freezer, space for commercial stoves, an area for our families, an area for our service providers to use. It was accessible, and the bonus was it had a large delivery door. But it meant we had to move quickly to secure the space. Well, the whole community came together to make this space possible, and these are the pictures from our new space. We moved into our new space on December 1st, 2019. As soon as we announced our plans to move and shared with the community about our new space, we had several groups connect with us about our space. The Good Food Box of Owen Sound is now run out of the Osha space. This has allowed for more of our guests to access this amazing program that provides fresh fruits and vegetables at a low price. We have had volunteer groups from elementary schools, secondary schools, the Flex program, as well as the Reach program as part of the also been able to distribute food from food rescue and other large corporate donations to other meal programs and charities in both Grey and Bruce County. The pictures that you see at the top are all food that was rescued from a local grocery store and turned into meals that we were able to serve in this community. Our response during COVID. On March 16th, 2020, we started to do takeout meals due to the COVID-19 pandemic. On March 18th, 2020, we took over doing both lunch and dinner for individuals in the community. In April, we started to provide meals to be delivered to individuals and families being housed in local motels, and they're delivered by Habitat for Humanity in partnership with the United Way. And through COVID-19, we have seen our numbers increase. As you can see on our graph, in 2019, up until the end of October, we served 18,483 meals. Looking in comparison at 2020, for the same date range, we're up to 58,483 meals. As you can see, this is a over 300% increase. In October, in August, we began to look at the winter and started to develop a plan because we realized that our guests couldn't wait outside in the cold and the snowstorms like tonight that we're starting to get. With the help of COVID funding from Grey County, we began renovations. These new renovations will allow us to have our guests come in out of the winter weather to pick up their takeout meals for themselves and their families. We will also be able to provide the guest that's picking up their meal a hot beverage to go in order to help them to get home a little bit warmer. I'm excited to say that the renovations are 99.9% complete and that starting tomorrow, we will be able to offer this new service so that our guests can come in out of the cold for a few minutes. The community has been amazing to help us to be sustainable since 2013. And when numbers rose during COVID-19, so did this amazing community support. We are completely funded by donations and occasional grants. Since the pandemic, we've been able to access grants from Grey County, the Community Foundation of Grey Bruce, Trillium Mutual, and Food Rescue. So how can the city help us? When we moved into our new location, we approached the city on how to proceed to get our taxes waived. At that time, I was informed to fill out a Form 357, which we did, and we worked with MPAC and followed the process through and found out that we were not eligible that way because we do not own the building. We are just renters. So on the city website, it says, current legislation requires council to rebate a minimum of 40% of total property taxes payable by a charity and permits rebates of between 0 and 100% to organizations deemed to be similar to a charity. So I'm here today to ask for the 100% because I believe that our service is essential to many individuals and families who live here in Owen Sound. We are here asking for this council to approve a 100% annual rebate grant for our total property taxes, which are based on the square footage of our charity. This rebate would help us to continue to feed many families and individuals in our community. It works out that if we were able to get the rebate, it would help us to provide over 4,000 meals to people in this community. Osha is not just a building or a kitchen or a hot meal. It is a community, and as part of this community, we need your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Also, discussion. Should I maybe go to staff first? Councillor Gregg?
Well, it's a difficult time for a lot of people. I don't think there's any sugarcoating that. There's certain people in the world, the rich have got richer and they were super wealthy to begin with. But there's a lot of compression and a lot of economic contraction going on. And I've been to a couple different communities and it's, I think, more visual already than it is here. I think we're very fortunate and blessed. It could get much worse. I mean, your presentation just speaks loudly to what the community has come through already for Osha. It's tremendous. And your walk this year, the newspaper article and the funds that were raised was just phenomenal. The Kiwanis investment and the support, just stunning. And you look at the new location, just terrific. I mean, and even in past financial statements, I see it here in different ways that the community and community groups and faith groups have supported is wonderful. But for me, there is any rebate, I guess, provided to an organization such as yours opens the door for others, or that those monies have to be supported by someone else. So it's very difficult for me to ask the taxpayer to rebate some more tax advantage here when that taxpayer might be someone that's fighting to save the restaurant right now, or going to be fighting much more so in 4 months in the bleak days of March when they haven't had Christmas season, or a motel or a hotel that's been operating at 40% capacity and will be for the foreseeable future. I guess that's the way I look at it, is free money provided here in some way, shape, form as a grant has to be consumed by the other taxpayers. And that's a very difficult thing to ask during these times for me.
Thank you.
It's just terrific what you've achieved in the last year.
Sorry, I cut you off there. Councillor Thomas would like to get his hand up next, and then.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship, and through you, thanks for the presentation, Colleen. I have some small experience of Osha, having been at the Walk for Food and been around at mealtime when your clientele was coming through, and it's a busy and thriving place. And I really do believe it fulfills a very, very important role in our city. For years before Osha came along, there were small programs would try to get going, and I think you're the first ones to really, really succeed, and I really commend you for that. That said, we do have 2 days set aside this week for budget talks, and I'm wondering, Your Worship, if that wouldn't be the more appropriate time to have a fulsome discussion about this request, rather than dealing with it here tonight prior to all of the other budgetary issues that we've got to deal with. So I'd be happy to make a motion that we delay discussion of this until either Thursday or Friday's budget meetings, just because we'll be talking about all the money at that point.
Ms. Allen, I think you had your hand up there.
I'd go along and support that. Certainly, we do have a slide in the presentation in your agenda right now dedicated to discussing grants in general, but certainly this question can be brought forward at that time. I guess I would just clarify one thing from you, Colleen. You're looking for your 2020 taxes to be rebated at 100% for just that year?
Yes, if I have to come back every year, I will.
Thank you, Your Worship. It doesn't matter to me whether we deal with it now or deal with it in budget. But I will tell you today, I can't support it. It doesn't matter if it's tonight or at budget meetings. And I'll tell you why. First of all, you know that I just love what you do and I appreciate what you do. I raise money every year. I go on the walk every year. Usually it's walk for water and food. This year it was walk for food. you raised over $200,000. Last year, you got 78,000. So when you talk about the increase in food that you've handed out, you should also talk about the 300% increase in the money that came in, because it's just the optics of it. So, but what happens is we can't just look at OSHARE as a council, as far as I'm concerned, because there's other nonprofit organizations that are trying to raise money. They can't even do their fundraiser because of COVID, that are in worse trouble than what you are. And you can't really separate the causes. It's difficult for everyone. And just to give you an idea, I brought along a question that we had I sit on the DIA. And on the 14th of October, during question period, we had this question asked. Is the city, or will the city, give business owners a tax break because of COVID-19, and also because we have all had a loss of business during the 10th Street Bridge construction? So I think that explains it all. Like it would just, you know, if we do it for one, we have to do it for everyone. Everyone is hurting because of the pandemic. And, but I did make a call today to Alex Ruff's office to see if there was anything. And did you look into this thing called SERS or SERS? It's called Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy.
Yes,
We did look into that?
We have.
Are you eligible for that?
No, not from my understanding.
Okay, and before this new one came out, there was one beforehand where the landlord fills out the form for you for subsidy. Did your landlord do that?
I believe so, but I believe we didn't qualify as well because we've been receiving grants. And so our income is higher, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
Obviously, it has to be in order to feed so many people.
Right.
And so because it's based on our previous year to this year, so that made us ineligible.
Right. So those are my comments. I mean, it's not the answer you're looking for. Like, honestly, I just think it's great what you've done. It's great what Barry has done with your kitchen. It's awesome. It's and what you're doing for the community is outstanding. It's just that, you know, I have to looking at everyone. Those are my comments, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Merton?
Through your worship, certainly I agree that this requires much more of a fulsome discussion. I just need to clarify from the city staff, would this set a precedent for leased property or rental property to receive this, or has this been done before?
Tenants are eligible for a charity tax rebate, and certainly other charities are receiving a charity tax rebate at the 40%. We have never before issued a charity tax rebate to a single or to any group of tenants under this program for 100%.
So we already have a policy and a procedure and a protocol for the approval process in place?
For the charity tax
Yes.
rebate? Absolutely.
I would find that helpful in our discussions on budget to have that brought forward or sent in advance so we can actually see the process. If you would mind.
And we have sort of the option, a minimum of 40%, which is what we offer in our program, up to a maximum of 100,000. But it would be for the program as a whole. We wouldn't typically select certain recipients under that umbrella of the rebate program to receive one rebate, whereas others would receive a different percentage.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Clarify, Kate, you said 40% up to 100,000. Did you mean 100%? Or is it an actual dollar amount of 100,000?
I meant percent.
Okay. Mary, did you have anything to add? No? Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none other, there is a motion on the floor from Councillor Thomas to kick this over to budget on Thursday or Friday. So all in favor? 1, 2. Good. Thank you. And number 10 on our agenda, public question period. Ms. Bloomfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've received questions from Joachim Ostertag, who is an Owen Sound resident and chair of the Climate Action Team. His email reads as follows. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council and staff, we have a few questions about the official plan discussion papers and the city's response to the Ontario government's plan to make radical changes to conservation authorities. But first, we would like to applaud the official plan's focus on making decisions through a sustainability, resilience, and climate lens. This is an excellent planning tool to include in the draft official plan. Questions. Number 1. We understand there will be a public meeting on January 20th to respond to the draft. Question 2. What happened to the consideration of the climate coordinator position? Will there be funding for a new staff position in the upcoming operating budget to allow the city sufficient staff resources to implement official and strategic plan, sustainability, and climate initiatives? And the last question. As part of the Omnibus Bill 229, Section 6, the province introduced a number of changes to the Conservation Authorities Act and the Planning Act that significantly either limit or completely change the role of conservation authorities to protect Ontario's environment and ensure people and property are safe from flooding and other natural hazards. The changes risk watering down or limiting the Conservation Authority's ability to ensure watershed-based approach needed to conserve and restore Ontario's important natural resources. Will Owen Sound City Council respond to and oppose the government's plan to radically change the Conservation and Planning Acts?
Thanks. I think number 3 is pretty easy to answer with regard to the Conservation Authority because we're going to be dealing with a letter from the Conservation Authority in a few minutes. The first question again was?
At the public meeting on January 20th, will it be in person or on Zoom?
I think Ms. Coulter has probably got the answer to that. Go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship, tonight after Council hopefully approves the minutes from Community Services Committee, we will do a public communication push on the 4 papers that are referenced in the question. The January 20th meeting, we're working with the clerk's office now to prepare the notice for both the open house and the public meeting. We're really hopeful that the open house can look a little bit like the open house did for the courthouse and jail, that it would be held in a bigger venue, we'd require registration. So fingers crossed that it's going to be at least in person. But you know, the next couple of weeks will sort of tell the story on that. But watch the website and we will be doing media advisories in advance of that.
Great, thank you. And the second question was?
Relating to the climate coordinator position.
Mr. Simmons?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that particular item will be part of our budget discussions this coming week, absolutely. However, you know, I just wanted to take a minute and just put a plug into our senior leadership team who has really started to take the climate change adaptation and mitigation conversation into sort of the daily vernacular of what we're doing here at a city. You know, in Q1 of 2021, we'll have the climate action plan coming to council here. Climate mitigation and action is also part of the official plan that's coming forward. It's part of the strategic plan refresh. The county, I know, has embarked on a climate action plan that looks at mitigation and adaptation also. So again, they formed a working group. We're still putting and assessing how that all comes together, but that will be in our upcoming budget conversation.
Thanks. And you wouldn't have been here at the time that we looked at it, but the county, we were all kind of scattered trying to figure out what we're going to do at that point. And the fact the county has already started. And as we just learned from the community wellness, safety and wellness plan, we've worked so much better and more efficiently with more of us in the group. So I know the county's looking at that. Thank you very much. Number 11 is correspondence from Grace Sobel Conservation Authority. Do you want to speak to that?
Thanks, Mayor Body. I can speak to this and introduce it to council. We've got a pretty good amount of correspondence that came through with the package, so I don't think anyone needs to have me read through it in its entirety. I'd like to note a couple things, and we do have a resolution which we'll be asking for support from the Conservation Authority, which was supported unanimously by the Board of Directors. But today, via email, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario issued a position on this, which I'd like just to touch on in case anybody didn't maybe get through their emails through the afternoon. Third paragraph in the media release: of significant concern is the creation of an apparent conflict between the fiduciary duty of Conservation Authority board members and the proposed amendment requiring board members to act on behalf of their respective municipal councils. The submission also seems to provide the potential to bypass the local development approval process, resulting in the loss of local scientific analysis. Other amendments open the door to possible reductions in user fees, which are designed to recoup costs. It also addresses the removal of the unproclaimed section, giving conservation authorities the power to issue stop work orders. The power for conservation authorities to issue stop work orders is needed to harmonize municipal and conservation authorities. Tremendous effort has been put forward by municipal governments to find a collective path forward that addresses certain issues and bolsters the ability to protect the environment in a meaningful way. Municipal leaders were looking for change, leaders were looking for needed Conservation Authorities Act refinements. In the past, during an intake on proposed changes, Council here did support a resolution from the Conservation Authority opposing strict containment in terms of the mandate that conservation authorities are provided through the province. They're not paying the freight. Locally they pay $37,000 of the $3.1 million budget minus I think about $276,000 in transfer funding for source water. So they pay very little. And as such, there's a general feeling out there, if you're not paying, why should you have that much of a say in our operations? We're operating a good corporation here, and we can continue to do so. Now, there's some backdrop to this. From 2015 to 2017, there was intake through the province looking at revisions to the Conservation Authorities Act. It was considered at that time, but not proclaimed, to invoke the part about the fiduciary duty of Conservation Authority board members being having an obligation to their local municipality as well as the Conservation Authority. That was not proclaimed. So our obligation is to the corporation, its body incomplete. But at the same time, you're representing your municipality. When it comes to budget is a perfect example of that. There was an Auditor General report into the Niagara Conservation Authority in the 2017. September 2018, the Auditor General did issue a lengthy report on her findings in terms of the Niagara Conservation Authority. There was some sections in that, one of which is 8.1, that the province does not give conservation authorities sufficient direction and guidance. Section 8.3, neither the ministry nor municipalities can step in to address serious concerns with conservation authorities. Our concerns locally here particularly have to do with, even the limitation on the vice chair and the chair of a 1 and 2 year term. We don't see why that's relevant. If you've got an effective, good chair, why should they have to leave the position and have someone else assume it just because it's regulatory? Some of this makes no sense. As a board member, I think I could speak for the others. We were entirely blindsided, as were the CAOs, with the Schedule 6 that came out. There was suggested discussion about the mandate changes, but what we've had come forward now is quite unforeseen. In terms of the planning impacts, I could defer to Ms. Coulter. She's prepared to speak to how it impacts us locally, because when you're talking planning, you're talking heavy regulatory and heavy policy stuff, and until you're right in there to see it, it's tough to digest some of this information. So, Councillor Kepke and myself would take happily any questions about the board discussion, and also questions on planning or how it impacts us locally to the Director of Community Services and Planning.
Thank you. Councillor Hamley, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. So when I saw this, I did some background work and made some phone calls on the issue. And I've learned a couple things in the last 48 hours. First is that the province is actually going to be bringing a number of amendments to this legislation at committee this week. So that's coming down the pipe. But second was that the minister's office would welcome the opportunity to speak with our CAO at Grey Sobel about their concerns with the legislation. So I'm wondering, Your Worship, instead of sending another motion, like a lot of municipalities are doing, we have a real opportunity to open a line of communication that might not exist otherwise. So I do have a motion here, Your Worship. In consideration of correspondence from Grey Sobel Conservation respecting Bill 229, Schedule 6, City Councillor directs Councillor Hamley with the City Manager to coordinate a meeting between Grey Sobel Conservation's CAO and the Minister of the Office of the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks.
Thank you. That's a motion. Councillor Merton.
Might I suggest that we approach this from a two-pronged, in other words, send the letter and proceed with your direction. The letter documents the support and our concerns, and the meeting allows an open dialogue to proceed to see what other opportunities we might be able to present. It's a great opportunity to have that door, and that's great that we might be able to take advantage. But having formal documentation of our concerns puts it on file as well. I'm wondering if you would consider an addition to your motion to include a letter of support.
We can do two motions. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, let's just try two motions.
Okay. Other discussion on the motion that's on the floor? Deputy Mayor O'Leary?
I just wonder, I truly appreciate your interest in doing this, with the city manager, but my only concern is we have two people that sit on council that sit on the Conservation Authority that are kind of in the know of what's going on and what's not going on, and I think they should be involved. It's just my opinion. I don't think it should be you and the city manager sort of thing, or at least add the two members that sit on the committee.
Clarification, you weren't suggesting our city manager, you're suggesting the CEO of the Grey Sobel Conservation Authority.
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
Just
okay, so I got that wrong. Please.
So in consideration of correspondence from Grey Sobel Conservation respecting Bill 229, Schedule 6, City Council directs Councillor Hamley with the City Manager to coordinate a meeting between Grey Sobel Conservation's CAO and the Office of the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks.
Okay. Any other discussion? Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Worship. I know the Director of Community Services is sitting here very eagerly waiting to provide her insight maybe on this matter. And I would love to hear if some of Pam's perspective on what is being presented.
Thank you, Worship. I did share with Council a summary from Conservation Ontario that I think provided a really good summary of the proposed changes. And it's staff's belief that the proposed changes will in many respects limit Conservation Authority's ability to protect people, property, and the natural environment. Much of the detail proposed in the changes will be in future regulations, and without meaningful consultation before the regulations are prepared, it seems a bit backwards. The Ontario Planning Act sets out matters of importance as matters of provincial interest, and among that list is the protection of ecological systems and natural areas, as well as the protection of public health and safety, as well as climate adaptation. The PPS also contains policies that support protecting and improving and restoring water quality and quantity and emphasizes the watershed as the most important scale for planning with respect to natural heritage systems. So, Your Worship, staff, it's my recommendation that you would support the recommendation with actually 2 additions to the whereas clauses referencing the Planning Act as well as the provincial policy statement in terms of what the provincial view on these things are. Certainly a small staff like ours, we don't have the expertise in-house, and we certainly value our partnership with the Conservation Authority and their staff. And I would also suggest that this council and this community was immensely well served by Dick Hibma, who served as the chair representing this council on the Conservation Authority for many years. And the proposed legislation, the way I understand it, wouldn't allow that type of representation in the future.
Thank you. Anyone else? Go ahead, Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Councillor Hamley, it sounds to me like you have a connection. And that's great that you and the city manager have a connection that can bring our CAO, Tim Lanthier, in a meeting with the minister. However, I think it's prudent also to at least have Vice Chair Greg of the Conservation Authority there, or Chair Kathy Little, or somebody else from Conservation, as just opposed to the CAO of Conservation Authority.
Yeah, no, I did think of the chair as well, and I'm more than happy to make that friendly amendment if that's what it is. Okay, yeah. So we're going to add that the chair of the Gray Sobel Conservation be added. Is that okay, Brianna? Yeah. Okay.
Councillor Hamley, I'm just thinking there is a whole hierarchy. Pam just mentioned Dick Hibma, who was the chair of the Gray Sobel Conservation Authority Board. He was also the chair of the Ontario Conservation Ontario. I would have thought the minister would be setting up appointments with the provincial level, and I wonder if we even consulted with our Conservation Authority CO to find out if he wants to take that meeting or if he feels that it'd be inappropriate for him. Like something seems rushed here in a sense that I'm not sure that, like, it's great, but I worry that we're putting him in a position that in a hierarchy there's somebody higher that should be going. Go ahead.
So my understanding of the issue in general is that Conservation Ontario has been reticent to even take up the idea that conservation authorities need some reform. So my understanding is that the ministry has been dealing with individual conservation authorities, some successfully, others unsuccessfully. And I'm just wondering if we should attempt to open that line of communication with our conservation authority.
Great, thanks. Okay, any other discussion? Motion's on the floor. Everybody understands it? Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that carries. Is there any other motion?
I'd make a follow-up motion that council support the resolution in front of us as amended. I'm not sure if procedurally you need me to read all this, because it would take a while. Could read fast, but it's a lengthy motion. But I would move that council supports the resolution in front of us, and Councillor Kepke has a list of addresses that we should address the motion, the resolution to.
Okay, so it is in front of you. If you want to read through it while we're going, go ahead.
If I may, Your Worship, the letter would be addressed to Premier Ford with a copy to Minister Phillips, which is the Minister of Finance, Minister Yurku, which is the Environment, Conservation and Parks Minister, and Minister Yakabushi, which is Ministry of Natural Resources and Forests.
Thank you. And Councillor Thomas, you had your hand up.
Thanks, Your Worship. You know, I read this over and I've been thinking a lot about it, and I really don't think I can support this motion. Pardon me. And it's not First item under the therefore be it resolved that the province of Ontario work with conservation authorities to address their concerns by removing Schedule 6 from Bill 229. Well, that's not working together with them at all. That's acceding to their demands that that be removed and that there be no negotiation of any potential future changes to conservation. And that's what I've been struggling with all weekend on this resolution. You know, I have a long history with the Conservation Authority, all my years as a reporter, lots of good work with conservation. You know, we see their stuff come through with planning all the time. It has nothing to do with not believing in the role of conservation authorities. But again, I think that this is not open to any kind of a change. It's saying support us by saying no to the government. And I'm just not sure that that is the way that you want to go with that. So that's my 2 cents worth on that.
Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Your Worship. On that point in particular, I think the gist of it is that the government already went through amendments to the Conservation Authorities Act, and these are amendments that are just out there and not even making a lot of sense, these additional amendments. So they've been working, they tell us, on the regulations for the Act, and perhaps Councillor Gregg or Ms. Coulter can add more to that, but I know that there are amendments out there waiting to be passed on the Act as it is.
Councillor Gregg.
If I could attempt to win your support for this resolution, I would draw this back to, it was slid into a budget bill November 3rd or 8th. I can't remember the exact date, but right in the rearview mirror. There's been no opportunity to go to the public in any way, shape, or form to get the input of affected parties, to actually inform affected parties to the scale of the changes. So it's the uncertainty that lays before us because of what's in bills, in Schedule 6 in the bill. And it's because it's past first reading and second reading, and now it's at last standing committee before it would be embedded in the legislation. That's where the desire to just withdraw this at this time until in the future we can have those meaningful consultations with the province and delve into a deeper discussion about the impacts of the bill. So I would say it's the immediacy of why we need to get that schedule removed at this time.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Worship. So I'm almost with Councillor Thomas, because the only difference, we have the same opinion. The only difference is I'm going to support the motion with the expectation that both Councillor Gregg and Councillor Kepke are going to share my thoughts. And my thoughts are, I'm disappointed that we got a letter. I'm disappointed that someone's not standing in that podium right now saying, you know what, we could have done things differently. We could do things better. We've made some mistakes in the past, but they're not. They're saying, this is garbage. We're not putting up with it. It's just a cutoff. So to me, they need to settle down a little bit and if you took that along to a meeting, I'd appreciate it.
Mr. Simmons.
Sorry, not knowing where the council's decision will be, but just from an administrative point of view, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Kepke, I'd suggest adding Minister Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. A lot of this conservation authority has a lot of development in it also. We'll put on our local, yeah.
Okay, given that it's 8:25 and we've got a gazillion other reports to go, I'm going to start pushing a little bit. So I'll call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. So we're down to the first staff report at 12A, which is Ms. Coulter with regard to the community safety and well-being plan approval.
Thank you, Your Worship. Really not much to add after the presentation this evening. I think the people in the room, Barb from the County of Grey, Sarah, the coordinator, the police chief, Councillor Kepke representing the Police Services Board, really does demonstrate the collaboration that will be needed to move this forward. So we would recommend that council would approve the plan, and a slight change to the recommendation. We will ask you to have a bylaw brought forward to formally adopt that plan.
I'm going to give Councillor Kepke the honor of moving that, given that she's working.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to move that recommendation.
And any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. 12B, Mr. Simmons, with regard to the airport.
Thank you, Mayor, and to members of council. Staff are continually looking at ways to add value for our hard-earned taxpayer dollars. Bishop Airport. Our intent is to impose or bring a landing fee to those planes using craft with a weight less than 4,999 kilograms and $70 for all aircraft with a weight above that. So the purpose of this report is to really provide you with an option to have that alternative revenue source implemented beginning as soon as possible in 2021. Currently, the airport has its taxation currently funds 80% of the annual cost for operating and maintenance of the airport. This year, those costs equal approximately $284,000 with a net cost of $228,000. We expect bringing forward with a landing fee could generate up to $100,000 in additional revenue. And we really are working on the guiding principle of once an airport is operating, it should generate sufficient revenue to retire debt and cover operating expenses, bottom line. According to Airports Council International, more than 54% of all airports impose landing fees and other sort of concession fees, et cetera, to help offset costs of running an airport. Again, staff are recommending a phased approach to landing fees. We begin this in January 2021 or as soon as possible thereafter, and imposing or bringing forward this two-tiered landing fee structure for year one. Our $100,000 revenue source is calculated with very basic math in the sense of the average flight movements at the airport are approximately 2,900 flights per year, excluding the flight training school. We would have the flight training school excluded from the landing fee scenario for year one till we can further identify how it would impact those operations. The chart in front of you also has historical landing fee calculations based off of the 4-year average and based off of everything from a $30 landing fee up to a $90. Again, the $35 and $70 is sort of a midway mark to help offset fees. If council so wishes to move forward with this recommendation, we'll communicate that with the airport management company, Phoenix AMG Incorporated, to set up a revenue capture method. Will be used to implement the collection of these fees. We'll also develop a communication to target current leaseholders that might have hangars or other uses at the airport, in addition to a communication plan to target relevant stakeholders. And we're open for any questions.
Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick question before we proceed. Doing an airport landing fee, is that a common charge that occurs in municipal airports?
Through the mayor to Councillor Dodd, yeah, across not just municipal airports, but across the world, a majority of every airport has a landing fee.
And when you're doing this report, did you find that like something like Georgian Bluffs has that the Wyerton International Airport, do they also have a landing fee associated with their airport?
Through the mayor to Councillor Dodd, Wyerton Keppel does impose landing fees.
That's fantastic. I think the most important part of your report is looking at that there's a actual net cost to the ratepayer in 2020 of $228,000 to operate that service. Anything we can do that will be financially viable to help continue operating that service, and if this is a way for us to bring extra revenue into the budget line to help keep this going, I'm more than happy to move that. So I'd move that recommendation.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to mention when I was first elected, I don't know the exact numbers, but the difference between what we were losing then and what we're losing now is a lot. So I thank the city manager for bringing this forward. I'll certainly support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Thomas?
Well, I'll just echo what the other two councillors have said. You know, in the 6 years I've been on council, there are a few things we've talked about as much as the airport. Council, and I think this goes along with can't keep pouring taxpayer money into it without any sense of an end to that. So I'd like to commend the city manager and thank him for this report, and I will definitely support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Kepke?
Thank you. Through you to the city manager. Just a question regarding medical helicopters. If they were to land there just to get gas or something, would they be paying a fee?
Through the mayor to Councillor Kepke, yes, that type of flight movement is included in this, military and medical and all other movements, so they would be assessed a fee.
Okay, anyone else? I will call the question. All in favor? And that is carried. 12C, Ms. Coulter, report on the site plan approval for 2261 9th Avenue East.
Okay, thank you, Worship. The city has received an application for site plan approval for a two-phase residential development in the East Bluffs planning area by AWG Properties, Inc. The property is, next slide, 5.5 acres, and it's located on the east side of 9th Avenue East. Include the town your screen, but phase 1 will include 96 townhouse units on a private internal street with access to 9th Avenue. And then phase 2 is the 60-unit apartment building in the bottom right-hand part of your screen. There will also be servicing, stormwater management, internal private road landscape, as well as a buffer abutting the employment lands to the east. So a significant amount of information was submitted in support of this infill type development. In terms of the provincial policy statement, this type of development at this density within the settlement area on full services that provides for transit, is walkable, and meets our stormwater management requirements is certainly supported by the provincial policy statement. The property is designated residential in the official plan, and within the East Bluffs planning area, it's medium density residential. The density is 43.6 units per hectare, and it meets the target for density within this part of the city's planning area. On 9th Avenue East, between 20th and 23rd, there's a missing section of sanitary and storm sewer, and this will be completed by the developer under a servicing agreement. The city's contribution to that is carried in the 2021 capital budget. The EA, the municipal class EA, will be completed by the developer. There will also be a future sidewalk along 9th Avenue with the developer making a contribution to that. You may have noticed in the information submitted in support of the application, there was a noise control feasibility study. It's important that we recognize that we have this interface with employment lands to the east, and the recommendations from that study will be implemented in the conditions relating to this development. There will be a short berm and a fence along that side as well. In terms of zoning, the site is zoned R5. It permits apartments and townhouses, and subject to the conditions, it does achieve all the required site and building regulations of the zoning bylaw. Councillor Gregg and Councillor Hamley were at accessibility in October when the plan was extended. The committee had generally supported the application, save and except there was to be an extension of sidewalk from the one dead end internal road to 9th Avenue, so we don't have a goat path worn in the boulevard there. And the red line shows it on both sides, so we'll make that correction and show it on one side. The stormwater management plan is acceptable and the site is generally well laid out. If we just go to the next slide, we'll see the elevations. Staff are recommending approval, subject to the conditions in Schedule G, and we'd ask council to approve a bylaw that would authorize the site plan as well as the servicing agreement.
Great, thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Leary.
Thank you, Worship. This is really, really good news and a massive report. So thanks very much for staff, like 160 pages. Happy to move the recommendation.
What's that, 100 and, I just had it written down, 156 units or something? Residential units, which is kind of nice. Others, comments? Seeing none, I will call the question. You guys are happy with this? All in favor? Carried. Perfect, thanks. Pam, I think you've got the next one.
More good news, Your Worship. The city has received another application for site plan approval for a, go to the next slide, 0.7 acre property on the east side of 8th Avenue East, north of 17th Street. It's a corner lot, and it was formerly the Mawikwadong Native Cultural Center. The proposal, next slide, includes a 3-story area from 8th Avenue, landscape and servicing, including stormwater, private outdoor amenity space, and a community room. Each unit has either a patio or balcony. Supporting documents submitted with the application included site plan, landscaped elevation, servicing feasibility, as well as a stormwater management report. In terms of the provincial policy statement, this infill type development within an urban settlement area at a medium density on full services is well located with respect to transit and proximate to supportive community services, as well as parks, and is a type of efficient, cost-effective development envisioned by the provincial policy statement. Our city official plan designates the site residential. It's zoned R5 and residential uses are contemplated in the OP. And the proposal as it was submitted complies with all aspects of zoning. Including the required parking, 29 spaces are provided and 29 are required and 33 are provided, including 2 barrier-free. This plan was presented today at our accessibility committee, and they did recommend that the developer consider matching the 4 accessible units within the building with 4 barrier-free parking spaces. The site is well laid out. The building is oriented to 17th and 8th. It has a attractive elevation. If we go to the next slide, the parking is safe, and I think there's bike parking provided. I think it really merits note that the stormwater management actually exceeds the city's requirement. The site is well lit. It provides for snow storage. There's an attractive waste and recycling bin, and staff are recommending approval subject to the conditions in Schedule E. And again, we would ask that you approve a bylaw to allow the execution of site plan and servicing agreements.
Great, thank you. Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, Worship. I would just like to point out that that was 174 new units, which would be coming to market sometime soon, with looking at the last report and including this report of this apartment building. That's incredible. It's incredible that we're watching multi-res units being applied in the city. It's exactly what we've been hoping for. It's exactly what we were talking about when we were doing our development charges discussion. It's incredible. There's many people who need the service, and we're seeing it coming to fruition. So it's fantastic. My question to the Director of Community Services is, we always talk about how quick our development team is, and I was just wondering if you'd be able to provide an update on this property, when it was the application was received.
Through you, Your Worship, the application was made on or about October 20th for site plan approval with the application, the supporting studies and fees.
So that's incredible. We're talking, what, 5 weeks to get that all the way through our... Incredible. So the other thing I noted on here was we're seeing, this is Jacqueline's, the junior planner's report, and I think this is a very big one for Jacqueline, so hopefully she's watching. But it's also incredible that we're seeing both of these plans coming from both our intermediate and our junior planners just shows how strong our planning department is. So as well, we need to send some kudos to your planning department. And with that, Your Worship, I'd be more than happy to move that recommendation.
Great, thank you. Any other discussion? Councilor Gregg?
Thanks, Mayor Body. I might just add, Councillor Thomas probably has the date etched in his head. The last term of council when it was broke on the school closings in Owen Sound. And by and large, a lot of this community felt flattened. I don't think the chambers have been as full or anywhere close to as full with residents discouraged and disappointed during those days when we had to pivot when the Board of Education was changing schools. But you look at a project like this and the tremendously successful adaptive reuse that McWickwadong Center went through this spring, this summer during COVID and went into the Dufferin public school. And now how quickly this has transpired on this lot. And boy, it sure does soften the blow for anyone that can remember just how hurtful that news was when those changes were undergoing and the schools were being emptied. So yeah, I'd echo Councillor Dawes, just a terrific good news story that's transpired over just a few weeks. So
Call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Councillor Dodd, I got 179, not 174, but I didn't take my boots off, so I'm not sure. Next on the agenda, Director of Corporate Service with regard to Resilience Stream grant application.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is just for information purposes, also to get a head start to ask Council for the authorizing bylaw if and when we do get approved to enter into that funding agreement, but we don't actually have it as of yet. So the ICIP COVID Resilience Infrastructure Stream was announced on November the 6th. And as usual, it is a very quick turnaround. Our applications are due on December 21st. This is an existing ICIP program. And what they've done now is they have added COVID to that green stream that has existed formerly. Under this funding envelope, the City of Owen Sound has been allocated $435,000. It's not a competitive grant. Projects meet the eligibility criteria and they get approved on that basis. We are entitled to these funds. It's a co-sharing grant with 80% coming from the federal government and 20% coming from the province. That's another plus. There is no municipal portion in this co-sharing, so it's fully funded, 100% of the project costs. And eligible projects are broken down into 4 categories, and many of these existed under the previous green stream, and now they've added the COVID as well. Retrofits, repairs, and upgrades to facilities, COVID resilience infrastructure, including modifications to support physical distancing, active transportation, so parks, trails, footbridges, bike lanes, etc., and then disaster mitigation and adaptation infrastructure. In order to consider which funds or which projects we should be applying for under this grant, sort of followed the same methodology that we did when we prepared the capital prioritized basis. The top 2 projects that fit under the eligibility of this criteria were the waterfront trails that are currently in the budget for the west side. So we're proposing that we allocate $395,768 of this grant funding towards those 2 trails. That will free up some gas tax dollars. Prior to going into budget, those gas tax dollars were being held as a contingency to offset the future debt payment on the 10th Street Bridge. Not knowing where we would be with the budget, there have been a few extra costs associated with the building and some contamination. So by holding on to that gas tax for that project, it allows us to make sure that that future debenture payment is managed, that is ultimately borne by the operating budget. That being said, in the event that we don't need those gas tax funds for the 10th Street Bridge project, I'd offer that we free them up for future trail work. And our allocated to some trail upgrades and trail extensions. And then there is also considered to apply for, it's a much smaller project, set project up at Public Works that is meant to prepare us for disaster mitigation, as well as to be a backup dispatch center. And this would again free up $45,000 in tax dollars in our capital budget that can be used to complete the modifications to facilitate that backup dispatch operations, or set aside into reserve for a future priority that gets identified. So the budget implications are basically what I just said. The total funding under the program, again, $435,768, freeing in tax dollars. And I'd like to acknowledge the contributions of the federal and provincial government. Certainly when we get these non-competitive set amounts of grants, that allows us to really put the thought in and make sure we're applying those funds where they belong, rather than thinking quick on our feet to come up with a grant application that's sort of a contest based. So I really do appreciate this type of funding. That's it.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Hamley.
Yep, Your Worship. As Kate says, it's great to see this, and I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Gregg.
Thanks, Rabbi. When I read this, I mean, it's awesome, terrific. But in capital budget, we had 2 trail restoration projects at $150,000 each approximately, and 300. So I was, just in the back of my mind, I had this project that council was split on a year ago, and it was the green roof at City Hall. We didn't go forward with it. I'm just wondering why we've scaled up the restoration projects from 300,000 to 390,000. Could we have scaled it up a little bit and still submitted a project like the green roof as part of a funding stream like this?
Through you, Your Worship, and I should have mentioned this in the report and in my just speaking notes. Another very strict timeline or limitation on this grant is that projects need to be completed by September of 2021. And in speaking with our manager or director, senior manager of Parks and Facilities, she believes that these trail projects can be completed within that time frame. This City Hall roof, green roof, has been deferred into 2022 in our capital plan. So we had not anticipated taking that on in the earlier part of 2021.
Answer it.
Thanks, Councillor Dodd. It could always be considered by council to look at moving it up from 2022 and applying in this funding grant and still moving up, but that's fine. It's just me thinking.
Thanks. Motion's on the floor. If there's no more discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. I think Mr. Kafalis is next with the blue box regulations.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, Your Worship. On October 19th, the draft blue box on October 19th, the draft blue box regulation under the Resource Recovery and Circular Economy Act was released on how the current blue box program will transition to producer responsibility between January 1st, 2023 and December 31st, 2025. The Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks asked municipalities to provide comment by December 3rd, 2020. The draft had very strong direction when it came to the transition dates, additional items that would be included in the new blue box framework, and enforceable targets producers are required to meet. Items of specific concerns included the exclusion of the business improvement areas, or in our case, the DIAs, exclusion of the set targets for compostable materials, and exclusion of the industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors. As such, staff is making the following recommendations: that in consideration of staff report OP 20054, respecting proposed draft box regulations, City Council 1 receives a report for information purposes. 2, direct staff to provide comments to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks on the draft blue box regulation related to 1, business improvement areas, BIAs, or in the city's case, downtown improvement areas that are not included as eligible sources for blue box materials? What do businesses in the BIA/DIA do with their recyclables? Stipulation of set targets for compostable materials, and the inclusion of industrial, commercial, and institutional sector under the regulation.
Thank you. Councilors? Councilor Dunn?
With that recommendation, I think there's some great things in there. Even just the little pieces of note that a blue box container will be provided for each residential unit. I think that's even just a bonus on itself. So, but I would be moving that recommendation.
Okay, further discussion? Not seeing any hands go up. Call the question. All in favor? That is carried. 12G, installation of water main check valve. Mr. Kafalis again.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through Your Worship. If Council remember, back in January 2018, the city experienced a major water break in the industrial zone, which resulted in total loss of service in the northeast quadrant of the city, including the industrial zone. The break was so significant that it resulted in negative pressures within the water mains, which required a boil water advisory for that sector. In order to mitigate such an event from occurring again, a check valve and chamber are required to be installed within the system. The check valve was previously tendered and purchased, but before proceeding with the installation, staff recommended to wait until the piping and valve replacement work at the water treatment plant was completed and that the water main on the 10th Street Bridge was installed and commissioned. The reason being we would be hard pressed to deal with any issues associated with 10th Street Bridge water main and a check valve chamber and still maintain a water service throughout the city if we tried to install such or proceed with such projects while we were undertaking the replacement of the water main or the piping and the valves within the water treatment plant. The city tendered the installation and received 4 bids on November 4th. The lowest bid of $447,770 is above the approved budget of $250,000. To make up for the shortfall of $197,777, staff will be adjusting the capital programs related to water for 2021 to ensure that the water rates won't increase beyond the 5% recommended in the most recent water rate background study. As such, staff is recommending that in consideration of staff report CR 20-084, respect and RFT 20-058, installation of the water main check valve chamber, City Council 1 award the above noted project to 1579137 Ontario Limited, SMRS Construction. The lowest compliant bid received at $447,777, including contingency and excluding HST, and 2, to direct staff to bring forward a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into an agreement, to execute the agreement.
Great, thanks. Councillor Thomas.
I'd move that recommendation.
Discussion? Call the question. All in favor? That's carried. Thanks, Dennis. I think we're back to Ms. Coulter. Yes, for 12H.
Your Worship, I lost my spot. In 2019, Council had approved an extension to the development charges holiday related to the subject property to December 31st, 2020. The subject property is 2.4 acres. It's on the west side of 9th Avenue East, north of 23rd. It's being developed by Richard Graham Construction. The development is 19 townhouse units on a private road. It is a lease development. So under the new development charges bylaw, a life lease doesn't qualify as purpose-built rental. Of the 19 units, all but 6 of them have occupancy. In the email from Mr. Graham, he notes that COVID-19 has caused significant problems for most business, and the construction industry is no exception. Unfortunately, as a result of COVID, we have lost over 6 months in our development schedule. Because of that, we request the December 31, 2020 date and the development charges agreement for Sound Lifestyles 2380 9th Avenue East be extended to July 30th, 2021. I presented a number of options for you, Your Worship, but staff are recommending that you would grant the extension to July 30th, and the city, under the authority of the Act and the Development Charges Bylaw, can enter into an agreement to allow a DC amount to be waived. And given the progress made on the development to date and the impact of COVID on all trades and projects, the request seems reasonable. So the recommendation is that you would grant the extension and direct staff to bring forward a bylaw to execute that amending agreement.
Great, thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Move the recommendation, Your Worship. I wasn't sure about it, but I think that the point is well taken, and that 6-month delay, if anyone's been to one of our local building centers lately and tried to get some building materials, everyone on earth chose to renovate during COVID. So I would certainly move the motion.
Thanks. Call the question. All in favor? That is carried. At 12I, we have a report with regard to Regional Relief and Recovery Fund Agreement extension.
Thank you, Your Worship. In June, Council had authorized an agreement with Tourism Industry Association of Ontario. It was a Regional Relief Recovery Fund. The initial deadline was December 31st to implement and spend your funding. The funding has been used for the Music at the Market, as well as the Shop Own Sound, SOS, marketing campaign that's just getting underway now. The province has made it mandatory that all the agreements be amended to now and February 28th, 2021. It's not an issue for Own Sound, but the extension applies to everyone, so we would ask for a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute that agreement.
Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Worship. I'll move that recommendation.
Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Deputy Mayor O'Leary, anything in Grey County Council or Blue Water Board of Health? Sorry, Grey Bruce Board of Health.
I do. Thank you, Your Worship. Grey County Council was a very short meeting last Thursday. Nothing to report specifically to the City of Owen Sound. I noticed the preliminary budget was in the newspaper today, but I'll wait until the real budget comes to make any remarks. Former Warden Stuart Halliday made his remarks on behalf of the past wardens. Warden McQueen made his closing address, as that was his last meeting before tomorrow night's inaugural session. That's the Grey County report from the Grey Bruce Health Unit. As of November 30th, in Grey Bruce County is a total of 336 cases to date. 50 active cases, 0 cases currently hospitalized, 0 deaths, and 1 facility in COVID-19 outbreak, 0 schools in outbreak, 0 daycares in outbreak. Concerning trends, of course, significant increase in the number of cases locally and provincially, significant increase in the number of close contacts of confirmed cases, currently 216 high-risk contacts associated with active cases. With schools successfully managing multiple investigations related to cases in schools with 0 transmission related to these cases within the school. Currently managing 1 COVID-19 investigation of a probable case associated with McVale Memorial Elementary School in Flesherton. Vaccine distribution and messaging, working community partners to ensure readiness to start distribution of the vaccine as soon as the vaccine becomes available, and aim to position Grey Bruce piloting the distribution. Some of the assets that would follow us to support a pilot. Grey Bruce has the highest rate of vaccine acceptance in the province. Grey Bruce has the highest proportion of seniors in our population. Grey Bruce distribution plan completed. Logistics challenges can be addressed locally. For example, ultra cold freezer availability in the immediate future through one of the community partners, Chapman's Ice Cream. We're also willing to address some safety training related to handling dry ice. Communication to address COVID fatigue, town hall with the Bruce Power, several media releases and media interviews. Ongoing actions for the Greyburst Health Unit. Contact tracing exceeds provincial targets with 100% of all cases contacted within 24 hours. And the health unit team continued to ensure essential public health activities not related to COVID. And with that, Your Worship, I would move receipt for those two reports.
Thank you. Has anyone got any questions for Deputy Mayor O'Leary? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thanks. Now, Council and anyone watching at home, just before I move on from the reports, I want to go back to the Hedera report because I think Councillor Dodd and I may have added up too many times on our fingers and our toes and got it wrong. I want to go back to Ms. Coulter just to clarify.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I should take credit for the math error. 23 units in Gwendon, 36 townhouses in Hedera, and 60 apartments, a total of 119, 96 in Hedera, 23 in Gwendon.
96 and the 60, and the 60 is included in the 96, just to be clear to the public, and probably everyone else around the table caught it but me. 119. So that's the both projects. Consent agenda.
Through your worship, on the consent agenda this evening is minutes for receipt from the Grey Sobel Conservation Authority and the Owen Sound DIA Board of Management. The last item on the consent agenda is the information package. A full listing is available at 13C.
Thank you. Councillor Gregg.
Moved by myself, Councillor Gregg, that City Council receives item 13A to 13C on the consent agenda dated November 30th, 2020.
And all in favor? Greg, anything to add on Grey Sobel Conservation Authority?
There's not a lot from the September public that the Conservation Authority has a vast amount of photos, but we're hosting a photo contest at this time. And just some details, these photos could be used in various publications put out from the Conservation Authority. And I could give you a great big long link to go to, but just go to greysobel.on.ca and you'll be able to follow from there, or on Facebook for those that are on Facebook. And the categories for the photos relate to healthy exploration, fantastic flora and fauna, embrace the chill, built feature fun, and lovely landscapes. The contest deadline is January 4th, 2021, and the prize for each category will be a season parking pass. So, hey, we encourage anybody that's outside and able to take advantage of take part in the photo contest.
Great, thank you. We have minutes from Owen Sound Downtown Improvement Area Board. You've already got your light on. Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. We had a deputation from the Director of Community Services respecting beautification in downtown Owen Sound. She spoke about phase 1 of the downtown river precinct, which focused on making the area inclusive and pedestrian focused. The features include hanging baskets, shade sails, wider pedestrian areas, heritage lights, bike racks, and event space. Our junior planner provided a presentation regarding the proposed community improvement plan. This plan promotes revitalization and placemaking to attract tourism, business development, and economic development. The Owen Sound DIA donated $100 to the Owen Sound Royal Canadian Legion for their Poppy campaign, and final approval was issued for the following businesses licenses in the DIA. Cannabis Grey Bruce, 236 8th Street East, Crowns and Fades Hair Salon, 925 2nd Avenue East, and James Special Services at 1035 3rd Avenue East. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Committee reports, starting with Community Services. Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Your Worship. There was a presentation by MHBC Planning on the official plan update and discussion paper summary. The 4 project phases are phase 1, kickoff envisioning, phase 2, research and analysis, phase 3, prepared draft official plan, which is the current phase we are in, and phase 4 is finalize the official plan. A new vision statement for the official plan was presented, and along with that, a series of discussion papers were prepared to assist with the review and focus on the key policy areas of sustainability and climate change, housing and affordability, transportation and infrastructure, and land use and design. And there's much more details available in the minutes or on the city's website at owensound.ca. There is a recommendation for council that the discussion papers be received, and direction is provided to staff to digitally provide those through the city's website, and also to provide notice of the open house and public meeting for the Community Services Committee meeting on January 20th, 2021. And I don't know if the director wants to add anything to that particular topic. No? You're good? Okay, special events. 2020 summer and fall events wrap-up was presented, and there was discussion on the pop-up drive-in movie nights, which was a net cost of just over $5,000 for the 2 evenings. Concert series was an actual cost of just over $1,000 for that event. Under Heritage, 120 10th Street East, the Menzies Insurance Building, which is the corner of 10th Street where I believe Channing's restaurant is. Properties of cultural heritage value or interest. There was discussion on the historic courthouse and jail and options, conclusions, and next step. The committee's recommending option 1 to complete the demolition and removal of the governor's residence and miscellaneous buildings, clean up the site, rectification of adjoining masonry at the courthouse and 1854 jail, which is an estimated cost of $370. And also, I believe there's a proposal for roof replacement in the 2021 capital budget. Included in that recommendation is those particular items would be in the 2022 capital budget that I mentioned earlier, and staff is being directed to reinitiate the process of disposing of the historic courthouse and jail properties. Under Building and Management, Community Sharp's disposable kiosk pilot project was presented, and the location for that will be in Carney's Lane. And the recommendation is that the city enter into an agreement with a qualified vendor for monthly services of the kiosk, and that staff monitor and measure the success of the pilot project for 1 year and report back with an evaluation of the program. Also, the Miller Waste Systems logo on the Julie MacArthur Regional Recreation Center is being replaced at a cost by Miller Waste to just include their current updated logo to Miller Waste Systems from Miller Waste Group. There was discussion on the Stobie Park Community Garden and transition of this use. This is located between 655 Fifth Avenue A West and 656 Fifth Avenue A West. However, the process still includes a public process, and input can be provided at that time. The manager, Parks and Open Space, gave us information on a trail counter trial program, which started in May of 2020. And of interest, the annual projected total of vehicles going in and out of Harrison Park is 330,000 vehicles. So lots of activity at Harrison Park. Building Division provided a year-to-date construction value totals of just under 65 million. So that's another good news story for the city. And that's it, Your Worship. And with that, I'll move the approval of these minutes.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Next is Councillor Thomas, Economic Development.
Thanks, Your Worship. Our economic development meeting was actually 3 times as long as community services, so bear with me. I'll just start. We did have a presentation to start the meeting from Jessica Linthorne and Dave Shorey talking about the Municipal Innovation Council. I won't go too into depth on that because we will be discussing that during our budget deliberations, which are coming up sometime in the next week or two, I think. We did have a presentation as well from the manager of community development marketing, who introduced BC Hughes, and they talked about the downtown rebranding project, which seems very interesting. And once again, 30 years later, we're saying the Sydenham River should be the focus. And I think that's a good thing, because I think we're actually going to do it this time, which is awesome. We also had a presentation from the Director of Community Services and quite a lengthy discussion on the mandate of the Economic Development, Tourism and Culture Committee. We will be having a special meeting in December to further look at the results of that discussion that we had at our meeting. And with that, I will move that we approve those minutes.
Thank you. Any questions? Oh, there is a question. Okay, it's voting. All in favor? Carried. And then next, thank you. Then next is minutes of the Operations Committee. Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will start by moving those minutes and deliver a brief update. The stenciling for the storm drain catch basin marking project, pilot project, has been completed, and staff are hoping to enhance the community's awareness of stormwater runoff by reaching out to volunteer groups in spring 2021 to help out with the repainting. I'm actually going to go to the Director of Operations. The 8th Avenue West Sidewalk project is underway and might even be completed at this point.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the sidewalk's actually installed. We just have to do the bit of backfilling behind the sidewalk, but it can be used by students.
Great, thank you. And then Councillor Thomas was mentioning the questionnaire. The Operations Committee also filled out a questionnaire to get a handle on the strengths and the aspirations of the committee, with the goal of refreshing the committee's mandate within the city's strategic plan refresh. And that'll be completed, I think, in February. Yep, that's it, Your Worship.
Great, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. So that approves all of the minutes from committees. At number 15, we have no postponed matters. At number 16, we have no motions for which notice was previously given. So we're down to discussion of additional business. And I think Councillor Dodd was the only one that put up his hand.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have a very, very exciting celebration coming this Saturday, December 5th at 6 p.m. On Rogers TV. We're going to have the 100th anniversary special of Incorporation of the City of Owen Sound. So we've got a lot of great people that are going to be presenting, which are going to be doing it all through Rogers TV. We've got Larry Jensen, some of the poet laureates. We have some past mayors. That's going to be great. We've got Deb Haswell is going to do a discussion. We have Ruth Lovell-Stanners, Stu Taylor, and Ova Jackson as they discuss the fond memories of their time in office. So Richard Thomas, Councillor Richard Thomas, and local historian, will also be on hand to share some of Owen Sound's storied history. So, and then finally, Mayor Body. Mayor Body will cap off the hour-long show and introduce the celebratory fireworks being done at 7 p.m. at Victoria Park. We would recommend, due to gathering and safety restrictions, the fireworks are going to be happening at Victoria Park, but we do recommend that just due to social distancing, that individuals watch these or view these either from Rogers TV or taking the necessary precautions and viewing it from the Harry Lumley Bayshore parking lot, Duncan McClellan Park, or the Heritage Place Mall parking lot. And that's all I have, Your Worship. It's very exciting. That's coming up this Saturday, 6 p.m., glued to the TV for one whole hour until the fireworks.
The fireworks at approximately 7 then?
Approximately 7 p.m. Pew pew.
Good, thank you. Deputy Mayor O'Leary, did you have something to add to
That's tough
that?
to follow, really. Pinch hitting for Mayor Body, Councillor Gregg and I participated in the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women flag raising last Wednesday morning. During the ceremony, the Zonda Club of Owen Sound presented a check for more than $800 to the Women's Centre Grey Bruce. I'd like to thank all the members of Zonda Owen Sound for what they do, and thanks to Councillor Gregg for joining me for such an important event. Thank you, Worship.
Great, thanks. Okay, so Councillor Gregg, number 18, motion that the committee rise.
Moved by myself, Councillor Gregg, that the committee of the whole rise and report.
All in favor, and that is carried. Number 19.
Moved by myself, Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Hamley, that the action taken in committee of the whole in considering public meetings, deputations, and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business be confirmed by this council.
All in favor? That is carried. Do we have any notices of motion being given? Seeing none. Bylaws, Ms. Bloomfield.
Through your worship, the bylaws listed for approval on tonight's agenda include the confirmatory bylaw, a bylaw to execute a site plan agreement with ATATS Designs Inc. for property at 1603 2nd Ave East, a bylaw to adopt a community improvement plan for the entire municipal boundary of Owen Sound, a bylaw to execute an amending contribution agreement with Tourism Industry Association of Ontario respecting the Regional Relief and Recovery Fund, and a bylaw to authorize the Director of Corporate Services to execute an amending beverage supply agreement with Coca-Cola Refreshments Canada Company respecting the supply of non-alcoholic beverages at city facilities.
Great, thank you.
Moved by myself, Councillor Gregg, seconded by Councillor Hamley, that bylaw numbers 2020-129, 130, 131, 132, and 2020-133 be passed and enacted.
Call the question. All in favor? That is carried. So that completes our business for tonight. It's only 9:15. We can go on for another half hour. Anyone have anything else they want to discuss? No one's taking me up on it. Good meeting. Thanks, everybody. Good night.